What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the Kettlebell Functional Training Muscle Mobility Program review. So this is part of the program review series. This is week 2, workouts 5 through 8. So I'm going to take you through the workout and give you my thoughts. So I didn't include all of the exercises that I did for each day, just so I didn't completely put the program on blast, but I included a fair amount of the important ones. So this is actually was a warm up exercise, two-handed clean. Um, I really like that as like a way to get the system warmed up, open up the hips, turn the upper back, something a little more dynamic. I went on the little bit more of the lighter side just to get everything warm. Then we went into a kneeling halo, which I really like for improving hip flexion. That's somewhere that I struggle. So it's cool that he incorporates these mobility exercises with a strength move. Like a halo is technically a strength move, but it's also a mobility drill for the shoulders, taking it through range of motion. And you see there's a lot of core work here as well, trying to not twist as I bring the kettlebell around my head. I really struggle with hip flexion, so I really like there's a ton of kneeling stuff, trying to actually squeeze the glute of the knee that is down to try and improve just my ability to get into hip flexion. I think there's a couple things contributing to my lack of hip mobility and as a consequence, the back discomfort. And I think hip flexion is a big one, as well as external rotation on both sides, especially the left side. So I like that he implements a lot of like 90-90 hip extensions and this kneeling stuff. So I'm looking forward to see how my mobility improves. I've noticed a slight improvement as I go through this program. Obviously, it's only been 2 weeks in, but what I have noticed is my back's feeling good. Um, well, with all my fire fit training, all the plyos, all the speed work, all the power work that would typically make me very stiff. So I'm noticing like I'm still able to to get after it and to hit it and feeling pretty good. So that was one of the main reasons why I did this program is so I could really hammer my fire fit training. So far it's doing a good job. This session I did at the fire hall. I mentioned in the last review I really liked how accessible these workouts are. That I can do them really anywhere as long as I have a set of dumbbells or a set of kettlebells. I can get this workout done. Uh, Here we have a single leg hip bridge to a pullover. So the pullover is really nice to get big lat stretch. I struggled there as well. I struggle really everywhere with mobility. So it's cool to get this to get some lat mobility work. It's a cool way to incorporate it with some single side hamstring and glute work, some hip extension. I'm noticing with the single leg hip extension, I can go a lot higher than I have before. So that's definitely an improvement there. And you're still getting that core work, right? Um, I Your body's tendency to want to shift to one side with the single leg bridge. So trying to be conscientious of that as I do the exercise and a little bit of core work. Everything has a little bit of core, which I like. I've noticed a big improvement in my core, not just the overall strength, but also the appearance by doing this. That's been like the biggest improvement. So now we have a step forward single arm snatch. This exercise is actually completely new to me. Involved a little bit more coordination and timing, which I really liked. Especially for fire fit, like I have to perform a clean into a front step, and that's how I initiate the stair climb. So this was actually a really cool way to put those two movements together that is really transferable to the sport. So I really like that. Went a little bit lighter here. I think I only went up to maybe 40 pounds when I could probably single arm snatch more than that. But with the step forward, I just really wanted to just work on that coordination. And I love all these power drills. Like I came from a weightlifting background, so all the snatches and clean stuff I really like. Just for power development in general. This exercise here, it was a deep squat kettlebell kind of like hammer curl. It was 15 reps, and I believe it was 4 sets. So squat down, hit a curl. So it's a cool way to kind of open up the hips because as I squat down, I drive my elbows into my knees. And then the grip on the kettlebell was smashing my forearms and my biceps. My forearms were so sore for the next couple of days. It was like a hammer curl variation. I really like this. With the kettlebell training, I noticed a ton of forearm and bicep demand, whether it's holding the kettlebell in a goblet position, some of the mobility drills, some of the curls, the snatches, clean stuff like that, which I really like. Obviously for fire fit, With the rope pull, the more like um, upright rowing I can do, the more snatches and cleans, the better. The more better I can strengthen my biceps. I've always struggled with on the right side a little bit of bicep tendonitis. I think from jujitsu and from work, walking the dog. So the more all this snatching, cleaning, curling, I think is actually really improving it, trying to build up the resilience of the bicep and the forearm, and also just improving my grip strength, which I'm a huge fan of. Like, who doesn't want to have big forearms? So this exercise here, narrow stance row, probably could have gone heavier. The challenge here is with the narrow stance, um, with your the grip on the kettlebell. I only have up to 70 pounds, so I'm thinking, because for the first 2 weeks, I didn't want to go too heavy, especially at the beginning of the workout. I wanted to see how I felt going to the end. And I got a ton of training, ton of FireFit training as well, so I didn't want to completely smash myself. Um, but I wanted to feel it the first 2 weeks and then start to progressively load the exercise. So I'm thinking about this next 2 weeks throwing on a weight vest, increasing my body weight to 20 pounds and seeing how that feels, especially for the lighter movements. I feel like it's going to be really, really challenging, but I'm excited to see how it feels, especially with FireFit a couple weeks out. The more comfortable I can get with the just added weight, I think the better. I think something that he does really well is, well, not necessarily what he does really well, but I think what he really likes is lower body stuff. I'm a big lower body guy. Um, I love squats and deadlifts and all that stuff, especially with FireFit. It's very lower body dominant. So I'm totally content with doing a ton of lower body stuff. Um, there is a fair amount of upper body. You see a lot of rows, a lot of pressing, but there's always a lower body twist, which is kind of his style. I really enjoy that. Um, you know, there's a ton of rows and ton of back work, a ton of shoulder pressing, stuff like that, single arm. But if you have a weaker lower body, you could be limited with how much you can push your upper body with some of these exercises because of the lower body demand. So you really need to have a lot of lower body resilience and conditioning to be able to load up the upper body. This is something I want to mention too. This workout is taking me about 60, 70 minutes. It was advertised 50 minutes, 10 exercises, about 4 sets per exercise. And usually the rep ranges between 8 and 15 reps. The rest, he recommends 30 to 60 seconds. I've been taking 45 seconds, and holy moly, has this been kicking my butt. Like, it is very much a conditioning workout, as much as it is hypertrophy based workout. So, fortunately, I was coming in with some good conditioning after the High Rocks prep. But if you are lacking conditioning, you could be limited with how much you could really lift. So that's something to be mindful. Like, if you're really trying to go to like, not failure, but 1 to 2 reps in reserve and really trying to push hypertrophy, your conditioning could be a limiter. Which that's the case for all workouts. But with machines, it's less of a demand than a lot of this full body stuff. And then finish the workout here with some push-ups. So it's supposed to be a single kettlebell push-up, but I change it into a deficit push-up. I find I get a really good stretch there, and I'm trying to develop my chest a little bit more. I feel like that's an area that I lack, and I really like this exercise, especially even for just getting a big chest stretch. I really enjoy it. So that was workout 1. Workout 2, day 6. I went up north, so the next 3 workouts will be at my friend's cottage, warming up with some toe squats. I really, really love the toe squats, getting a ton of knee flexion, working on that foot strength, working on the balance. I really love that to warm up. I figure that's why I wanted to include this, especially for knee health. The more knee flexion I get, the better I feel. Talking about accessibility of this workout, the fact that I went to a friend's cottage and I was able to still get after it, it says a lot about this program. I just brought up a set of dumbbells that went up to 95 pounds, so I was really able to push the workout still. So I gotta hats off to him for the accessibility. Here, still warming up. We had 90-90 hip extensions. This I'm noticed a big improvement on, particularly on the left side. This is a movement pattern I really struggle with. I mentioned earlier I struggle with external rotation. So the right side has been getting better. The left side I've noticed a significant improvement. It still needs a ton of work, but I'm able to get that hip extension without using my hands. So for me, that is a huge, huge win. I really like this as a warm up, warming up the hips, the glutes, the core. I've been really enjoying this. I really enjoy the Another thing I've been enjoying is just the variety of movement. Expose myself to different movement patterns I haven't done before, exploring different range of motion and challenging the body in different ways, challenging my coordination, my balance, obviously my flexibility, um, as well as my endurance. So yeah, it's been really, really, really nice. Another thing I've really been liking is how much I can challenge the body with still heavier weights, like using, some instances, up to 90 pounds. A lot of the weight I'll be using is between like the 40 and 70 pound range. Here, I'm using a 60-pound dumbbell for the ipsilateral deadlift, and it smokes you. You really feel it in the glutes and the hamstrings, the core, definitely the grip because of the high rep. So it's impressive how much you can stimulate the body with lighter load compared to, I could back squat 400 pounds, but or deadlift, close to that as well. But all of a sudden you stagger your stance, you up the up the rep count, and it's quite challenging. I really like this movement here, the kickstand deadlift, especially for the imbalances that I have. This is definitely a problem area where, especially with my left leg forward, I definitely notice I shift. So this is a really important movement for me. You can kind of see a little bit of the shift here, um, and just strengthening the feet in general, the grip. Especially for my job, this is such a common movement pattern in a split stance, carrying a load on one side. So I'm excited to really push this movement. See how heavy I can go. Maybe get 80, 90 pounds, strengthening the grip, the core, glutes, hamstrings, everything on that side. And curious to see what it translates when I transition over to barbells. Curious to see how it translates. So here we have, I believe it's a calf raise goblet squat. So this was actually a new movement for me. I've done the toe squats before. I've loaded it, but going from a flat foot to a toe to a squat, really challenging my balance, trying to work on squeezing the ground and gripping the ground with my feet, really trying to strengthen my feet. I got flat feet, my big toes cave in. So this is actually a really important move for that. Um, and yeah, a little bit of balance. So this is actually really fun. I've really been enjoying squatting on my toes. I've always squatted um, with some sort of wedge, so either weightlifting shoes or wedge underneath my feet. So I do enjoy the movements where I get the most amount of quad flexion. But this balance aspect is really cool. I really like it. And strength of my feet is something I want to do just with all the plyometrics and, stair climbing, stuff like that. The stronger my feet, the more I can actually actively push off, I think the better. So this is a cool movement. It's definitely towards the middle of the workout when my balance is kind of shot. It was a very interesting addition. Here we have a front pivot lunge. So a little bit of a rotation, and then an offset carry as well. So working on the hips ability to internally rotate on one side and externally rotate on the other, pivoting with load. So something completely different, challenging the cores, the quads, the glutes. Um, yeah, I like it. Just this program has me moving in different ways, right? Rather than just doing a conventional lunge, adding a little bit of twist, getting a little extra mobility work in here as well. Um, I did find it challenging with the dumbbell because of how bulky was this one in particular, but we were able to manage, trying to find the rhythm, of rotating kind of on my heels. I would like to have both feet rotate at the same time, but that's something I'll work on. This one was new for me. It was a shoulder press into a warrior windmill. So this is, I believe, set two. The set one was not great. Actually, once I warmed up, started to feel a lot better. This is actually a movement where I'm starting to see a little bit more mobility improvement in this windmill position. One leg straight, one knee bent, kind of like a lateral lunge, and then having that thoracic mobility to keep the dumbbell stabilized. Now, obviously, I'm using a dumbbell here, not a kettlebell. So the kettlebell would challenge that kind of um, straight arm position. Um, but I really, really like this four core, four mobility. This is a perfect example of a way to implement um, mobility training into your strength work. There's a little bit of shoulders. Obviously, with the press, you're not
with this weight being this light, you're not going to challenge shoulders as much, but shoulder stability for sure. Upper back strength, thoracic mobility is a big one, and then inner thigh mobility, hip flexibility, as well as you're challenging your obliques and your core to be able to move like this. I really, really enjoy this one. And the later sets felt way better once I got the rhythm of it. Now, a movement like this, you don't necessarily need to load as you're easing into it. I was sticking with, I think I went really light here. I think I went up only up to like 20 pounds. Try to use this more as a mobility practice than really trying to push the load. So I really like that one. Here, some good old fashioned bicep curl to shoulder press. This is a little bit more on the muscle building side. Um, one side at a time. I actually was surprised. I definitely felt some oblique engagement here with just the offset loading again. Higher rep. This was about I think 15 reps. Bicep curl to shoulder press. So a wicked pump here, especially at the end. I like that towards the end, especially for the more upper body dominant sessions. There's a good high volume upper body work, and especially by the end when your biceps and shoulders are tired from holding the dumbbell overhead or the kettlebell in front of you. It's a fun way to get a little pump. So I gotta say, like, he does a very good job of blending the mobility work in with the strength work, um as well as it's like I've said before, it's taxing. It challenges you cardiovascularly for sure. By the end of it, you're just like, man, I am dripping in sweat, breathing heavy. Yeah, phenomenal session. Really enjoying the workout so far. I'm excited to see my mobility improve. And yeah, see maybe we could pack on a little bit more muscle, especially in the upper body with all the firefit training. It's very lower body dominant, so I don't want to neglect my upper body. So I'm curious to see if I'll see some upper body changes. Definitely in the shoulders, in the arms. All right, so we got day 3 here. So warming up with a RDL into a lunge. So I went a little bit lighter here. It took me a little bit to figure out how I wanted to hold the dumbbell. You see I'm rotating with the palm facing me and then twisting it a little bit just to get the range of motion. This is a fun movement pattern to get warmed up, challenging the core, glute, hamstring. Um, yeah, I like having this at the beginning. Try to again go a little bit lighter in this movement pattern, just to get the body primed. Like I try not to push the weight on the first sets. I'm not really warming up before this. I'm just grabbing the weight and going. So I just try and kind of grease the grooves with these movements, especially in the early on. Like you see the same thing with the cleans. I can go heavier, but that's not my objective at the beginning. There'll be a ton of lunging and hinging later on where I can really start to push it. So this is just more like an activation in a warm up. So oftentimes there's a weighted component and a body weight mobility. So sometimes it's like a thread the needle or a lunge and reach. I didn't include those. I don't want to give away all the program, but some good mobility stuff you saw in the session before. Some 90-90 hip extension. So it does a really good job of priming the body so that you can really start to lift heavy. And yeah, but by the end of these sessions, I'm often feeling better than when I went into it. Feeling looser. Everything feels turned on. I feel like the more I turn on my core, the better my back feels, better my body feels in general. So does a really good job of turning that core on right away. So this was a fun one to warm up. And then we moved into a goblet march. So train the hip. Oh no, this is a B stance squat to balance. So getting the hip flexors involved, yeah, definitely challenged my balance more than I thought I would. I In the future, I definitely should have held that knee raise a little bit longer, but I was my balance isn't great, especially with that type of load. So that's something I'm going to work on is slowing it down a little bit. But I like these kickstand squats, get big knee flexion on that back leg, strengthening the feet as well as allow myself to experience deeper ranges with these B stance squats and go a lot lower than I normally can with a bilateral. So that's great working on the ankle mobility and range of motion in the hips with these kickstand. I really like not just the kickstand squat, but the kickstand deadlift. I feel like I don't feel the load as much on my lower back.
as I do in the glute and the hamstring. And I find the same thing with these kickstand squats. Sometimes as the load gets heavier with the bilateral squat for me, with my limitations, I start to feel the load in the lower back. Losing that ability to maintain that tension in my core because of the hip restriction. So the B stance has been a really nice way to explore deeper range of motion in the squat. Right now, we're moving into a single side loaded get up. So this was actually a very new exercise to me. You wanted to come out of that kneeling position in somewhat of like a quarter squat and then squat up, and then kind of lunge down and reverse it. Really cool way to get some hip rotation in there. It's kind of like a kneeling hip car in a sense, having to pick that knee up and bring it around in front and then stand up. So that's a cool way to challenge hip mobility. Using the dumb. It's supposed to be with a kettlebell, but I'm using a dumbbell. So holding in this rack position, I saw Adriel Myers do that in some of his videos where he's loading up with dumbbells, and I wasn't sure how it was going to feel. I thought it was going to challenge the biceps a little bit more, but actually wasn't that bad. It's a really cool exercise, loading that get up position, which we don't do often. So I really like that. Definitely challenging the quads. Again, working on that. I find with the kneeling stuff, even the double kneeling stuff, it's a great way to work on hip flexion. Doing some like double kneeling upright rows. It seems simple, like, well, why don't you just do it standing? But it's a simple way to just get a little bit of extra flexion in the hips, stretching out the quads. So I really enjoyed this exercise. I know this is such a buzzword, but I really found this super functional. So definitely one of my more favorite exercises in the session. Now I'm sure this is intentional, um, because Adrian Myers is a very intelligent coach. But these movements that are a little bit more challenging mobility wise. Now this get up isn't the most challenging, but still, from a kneeling position, you have to bring your leg all the way around in front and then stand up. The other workout with the warrior windmill, I the exercises that would be the most challenging if you have mobility limitations seems to be in the middle of the workouts when you're the warmest, the loosest, and not the most fatigued. So I think that's genius. I think it's a really smart way to put it in. Started with a little bit more heavier compound movements at the beginning to start to warm up the muscles, kind of like I say, grease the grooves. Like this workout started off with the squat balances as the main strength movement, and then as we got more and more warm, moving into some of the more challenging mobility exercise. So I really like that. It kind of gives you a chance to give it your best go, and not right in the beginning when you're super cold, trying to do these ranges and potentially hurt yourself. So very well programmed in that sense. Right now, we're moving into a little bit more of a power move. So this is supposed to be with the kettlebell. It's supposed to be a kind of like a snatch high pull, where you have two hands on the kettlebell and you're doing a high swing. But because I had the dumbbell, I decided to do single arm high pulls, and I worked up to about 70 pounds, which was surprising for me. Feeling very strong, very powerful in this program. This movement right here was probably one of the most challenging movements of the session. It was a Cossack lunge halo, but you're starting in kind of like a curtsy position, which I find the curtsy position very, very challenging for me with my tight hips. And so then coordinating that right into the halo and the Cossack lunge was something different. But it's definitely fun way to challenge the core, warm up the shoulders, stretch out the glutes, the adductors. I really like something I really like about his program is moving in different planes. A lateral movement, which I feel like most people are missing. A lot of people are doing lunges, RDLs, squats, but not really loading up that lateral position, strengthening those adductors, which can contribute to a lot of hip issues for people if it's weak and if it's tight. And I definitely have tight adductors, so I've really been appreciating all the lateral moves. Um, yeah, so that was really good. Now we got forward lunges, racking on a single side. Nothing fancy here, nothing too complicated. Loaded it up to about 60 pounds. I really like the lunge pattern. I've spent a lot of time lunging. Initially, when I was dealing with some back stuff from squatting, I switched to heavy barbell lunges, which made a huge difference. And that was kind of when my eyes were open to the benefit of the unilateral training and the imbalances that I had. So I really like the amount of lunges that we do. I find it super taxing on the body, um, but really applicable to running, to fire fit, because it is very much a single leg dominant sport. Climbing stairs and running and such. So I really enjoy the amount of lunges we did, and racking on one side again, like I've mentioned time and time again, really challenging the core, trying to stay upright and resist the balancing. Then we moved into some more core work. So this was a newer plank. We had done this before, an adductor side plank. Um, challenging the upper body, obviously, the shoulder stability of maintaining that dumbbell overhead. Challenging the glute med with the leg on the bottom to keep the hip upright. But something that I didn't anticipate with this was that the top leg that's bent. It's kind of like a pigeon pose or a 90-90, especially the closer you bring your foot up to your body, getting a nice glute stretch. I try to be intentional with this side plank, so I try to really push both feet into the ground and turn on the glutes, the adductors. So this was a cool way to challenge the core as well as trying to improve the mobility. Um, Side planks are a staple for people with back pain, strengthening the obliques, the QL, the glutes. So I appreciate all the planks. This plank here was 45 seconds, um, which I was like, oh, 45 seconds shouldn't be too bad, but it was definitely spicier than I anticipated, especially with the added shoulder element of balancing that dumbbell overhead. Definitely found it challenging, but it was cool at the end to really smoke the core and to try and get a little bit more hip mobility work with that front foot higher up. And this was towards the end of the session, so this was a really really good session. Right, moving into the final session of the week, day 8, starting with some. It was a two-handed clean, so I performed it with a dumbbell. Nothing too heavy, just kind of warming up the upper back, the arms, the legs. Um, Feeling really good, actually, even in just like the start position, the kind of that deadlift position, feeling a little bit more mobile, feeling like I can get in a deeper position. I really enjoy um, the amount of power movements that we're throwing in. It's not all snatches and cleans. There's a lot of, but I appreciate the amount that he's putting in there, especially as a warm up. It's a fun way to warm up. Then we went into some goblet marches here, training the hip flexors, the core. Um, Actually, from this video, not looking too bad. Oftentimes people are shifting significantly to balance. It doesn't seem like I'm shifting too much, but I definitely could slow it down. And then this was a new exercise. It was a squat mobility, kind of like a frog squat, loaded frog squat, trying to get as deep as possible, pushing the knees out. I really like that early on in the session. But having this follow the cleans and the marches, so warming up a little bit more before getting into these deeper positions, I really, really liked. So, and getting the arms warm, getting a little bit of a bicep pump. Yeah, I really like the way he's structuring the warm ups. Getting to the sessions feeling good and feel like right away I can start loading up the exercises versus needing like a big warm up. This was a double rack squat. So as I went through the sets, it started to feel better and better. Um, I did a little bit of not I don't know if I would call it misloading, but non uniform loading. So each dumbbell weighs a little bit different. One is heavier than the other, so I would switch it each set. Um, just another core thing um, that I've been implementing, and very applicable to life. How often is the weight that you're carrying the same? Moved into some suitcase split stance. This was smoking my quads. And really try to work a little bit more on the dorsiflexion here, pushing the knee over the toe as I went down, holding a suitcase again, time and time again. Just a sneaky way to throw in some core. Um, I kept around 50, 55 pounds because at this point in the session, my quads were feeling it. At this point in the week, my quads were really feeling it. So kept it light, try to just really get a pump, keeping the tension on the quad as you can see, not really letting the leg get fully extended, just trying to burn it out. Moved into some gorilla rows, which was tough with the dumbbells. I kind of had to pull it a little bit higher up in the chest rather than pulling to the hip like I normally do. But cool way to train the upper back. Didn't go too heavy because of the positioning. Kept around 55 pounds. Just didn't want to load up the lower back too much. But as I was doing this, I'm like, this is pretty applicable to the rope pull for Fire Fit. So feeling really strong here. Like 55 pounds, moving, felt pretty light. This movement was very challenging for me. This was the um, curtsy lunge rotation. I couldn't get as much rotation as I would have liked out of a normal lunge just because of how limited I felt in this position. This is a weak exercise for me, as you see. I have a hard time keeping the knee in line with the ankle just because of the tight hip. So really glad that these were thrown in there and adding the rotation at the bottom. I noticed it got a little bit more of a stretch in the glutes, and I don't like it. Like rotating under load is super important. Just develop that confidence and that core strength. I'm excited to see how this movement improves over time. I really struggled with it. I went a lot lighter. I kept it around 30 pounds, um, just so I wasn't twisting too much. I really wanted to get it be as controlled and as deep as possible. Um, so this is definitely a movement that I'm looking forward to seeing if it improves over time. And that was a full week of training. Thanks for watching.